Welcome back to the Childhood Cancer Perspective. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this journey. I want to continue sharing stories of JC and our family, as a cancer diagnosis, as you all know, is a family diagnosis. Now, JC was diagnosed with choroid plexus carcinoma on January 30th of 2020. That happened to be our oldest daughter's birthday. We were rushed to the hospital while we were trying to eat cake. We had to get out there. It became very overwhelming, very, very fast. And the subject that I want to talk about today is burnout. Now, going through this journey a little bit backwards and all over the place, I want to talk about what happens when you get so overwhelmed that you don't know which way is up. If it's backwards or forwards, which day it is, day or night, you don't know any of this. It becomes a blur because you're focused with blinders on to making sure that your child gets better, or making sure that your child is safe and healthy, has a good day, is making sure that their doctor's appointments are taken care of, all while running a nonprofit and trying to send smiles to other people and other children and families that are going through this horror that we know as cancer. It's very easy to get burned out very quickly. It's very easy to be overwhelmed to the point where your usefulness starts to dwindle because you are taking on so much at one time and taking on so many different tasks and so many different families that need help, and you're making sure that your own family is taken care of, but at the same time your health is also put on the back burner. And this is a very real thing when it comes to facing childhood cancer head on. There's no other way that you can go about it. Once your child is diagnosed, goes through the treatments, through the process, and unfortunately in the end, if your child does pass away, there's a lot of ways you can go about that. You can turn that tragedy into something good. You can start a foundation, look for change, try to make something better. You can also cancel out the cancer world, and you can just not forget that it happened, but just don't let the definitions follow you. And again, I've said it before, none of it is wrong. None of it is right. It is however you feel like you need to move forward with your life after the unfortunate passing of a child and the that diagnosis that happened with pediatric cancer. And for us, for our family specifically, when we got that diagnosis, I did not know how to react. I did not know what we were going to do in the next 12 hours, let alone the next 3 years. When we got the diagnosis of a tumor, of a mass in her brain, that early morning hours of the 30th and the 31st, I froze. Personally, I froze. And I was, at that point, my only focus was to make sure that my wife was okay, and to make sure that we figured out how to take care of JC the best we could so that we could get her back home where she deserved to be. And at that point, we didn't know how serious things were. And we didn't know how much of our life was going to change in an instant with one single solitary CT scan, one single solitary MRI, how our life was going to change. And for me as a person, I have always been somebody that takes something on 110%. I go 100 miles an hour no matter what. I don't have an off switch. I don't have a kill switch. I don't have a slow down speed. I have one speed. And as my friend used to say, wide open. That's that speed. And that can be great. It can be very therapeutic. It can be very helpful in getting things done that need to get done, because for the people that slow down, this is when you catch them. Those people like politicians and lawmakers and those legislators all at once, when they slow down for a second and take a breath, your 100 mile an hour speed is what catches them. That's when you get them on board with what you're trying to do. And so that takes on a life of its own. And then that's just one section of what we've done as a family, with the legislative side and the advocacy side. The fighting with cancer. When your child is diagnosed, you are rocked to your core. And not knowing what's going to happen the next day, the next minute is something that is very, very stressful to me, because although I like to be spontaneous, I like to know what's coming. I like to know what's going to happen next, or at least have an idea of what's coming. I'm not a jump scare kind of person. I'd rather know there's somebody around that corner than find out when it's too late. And taking on that battle of trying to get things, or trying to hold things together, or trying to hold the family together, trying to advocate, trying to focus on who's going to take JC to her doctor's appointment, who's going to have to miss volleyball games and concerts, and seeing your children get dressed up for dances and go to football games, and who's going to have to miss that, and who's going to go to the hospital, who's going to stay overnight, who is going to make sure that food is on the table. There's a million things. And as a parent, I think everybody can understand that as a parent, you have a million things going on at any given time, and your ability to sit and take a break is sometimes not there. Add in a cancer diagnosis, a life-threatening illness to the mix, and that time that you had to sit down, even if it wasn't there, is now not even a thought. People used to get upset with me, and they probably still do, because I don't get back to them in time, or I don't follow up with plans, or I don't make plans with them, whatever the case may be. And a lot of that, and I would tell them, is because I don't have 2 seconds to rub together, let alone worrying about whether or not we're going to be going out for dinner next week, or whether or not we're going to be planning a get-together at the end of the year. I don't have time for that. And unfortunately, that's not always good. It does lead very much to burnout. It leads very much to you overwhelming yourself, overwhelming your body and your psyche, and your ability to really function, because you're trying so hard to make something happen. And a lot of work goes into everything that we do as cancer parents. A lot of work goes into making sure that our house is safe for a child that may no longer be have the ability to walk, or the ability to really communicate, or is just very fragile from the chemotherapy and the immunotherapies. And you have to be really careful about that. And you have to be careful about certain things that maybe, as kids and as parents now, even, I grew up in the 80s, that we didn't worry about. We didn't worry about whether or not you skinned your knee, or whether or not you got a bruise, or whether or not you ate something you weren't supposed to. That kind of, we did, but you did. That's the kind of stuff that we say now, that you just rub some dirt on it and walk it off. And when you're going through this type of diagnosis and the treatments with a child that is dealing with this, you learn very quickly that a bruise, that a scrape, that a cut, that a headache, it's not just those things, that it can have very, very deep-rooted meanings. And you become very, very fixated and focused on making sure that your child is safe all the time. And you push this on your other children too. And it becomes that you hear a cough, or you hear something that sounds like it may be somebody getting sick, or you hear ow, or that kind of thing, and you immediately, unfortunately, will go to the worst case scenario. And I know my wife does that. I almost get upset with her sometimes, because I don't like to, but you're kind of forced into a position like that. Don't go to the worst case scenario, but your brain is almost pre-designed to do that once you're part of this community. And you, like I said, you become fixated on making sure that everything is okay all the time, making sure that they eat the right things, and that they drink the right things, and they get exercise, and they are getting up and moving, and they're doing their schoolwork and things like that. And you have so much laser focus on that you essentially lose track of everything else that's going on in your life, whether it be your own health, your own fitness, your own well-being, whether or not you're eating or drinking enough yourself, whether or not you're focusing on each other. If you, as a couple, whether or not you're focusing on your other children, there's so many factors. And as you can see, I can continue to add to this list. But what it does is it puts you in a state of always on the go, in a state of I've always got to be moving. I've always got to be doing something. And if I'm sitting still, I feel like I'm failing. And so getting burned out is very, very easy to do. And I have been there, uh, many times. I've gotten myself to the point where have worn myself to being sick. I've worn myself down to just feeling horrible, and my body tells me that I'm not taking care of it. My immune system is, generally speaking, has always been very, very good, but you can only do so much. And part of what I was going through when I was working was that I was putting in 8, 10 hours, a day, sometimes more during the holidays. And then I was coming home and jumping right into work, jumping right into nonprofit scheduling for events that we have coming up, or for throwing packages together for these kids that are reaching out, and trying to keep up with everything, all while trying to keep up with doing things with my kids and doing things with my wife and as a family, and neglecting that. And I acknowledge the fact that I neglected a lot, and I got called out for it a lot. And I think we're all kind of guilty of it, that we get so laser focused on something that the rest of the world seems to stop around us, even though it's very much moving. And we have to take that time and take that energy and make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. And you can use the analogy of, when you're on an airplane, they tell you to put your mask on first, before you help anybody, no matter what the case is. And that's because if you're dead because you didn't put your mask on and you can't breathe, you can't help anybody else. You're no use to anybody else. If you are dead or injured, or you're passed out because you don't have oxygen, you got to put your mask on first. And that's the thing. We often get into this type of diagnosis and this type of lifestyle, and we shut everything else down. Whether it, like I said, your fitness, your eating, your family, you shut it all down because you want to make sure that your kid's okay, and you feel like you have to do everything. You have to 110% of the time, you have to be focusing on whether it's taking care of them, or trying to find a cure, or trying to find better treatments, or making sure that what they're going through right then and there, and the treatments they're going through, are the right ones, and making sure that they're recovering well from those treatments, or making sure you have people. I mean, to the amount of times that you're on the phone, or you're reading your MyChart app to check results and things like that is incredible. It takes a lot of time, and it's a lot of energy. And what people don't realize, I think, is that while it takes a lot of physical energy to do all of those things, and being physically burned out and emotionally burned out are different. Being physically burned out, I think you can still do things. You can still move. You can still you can find another gear that you didn't think you had when you're completely physically drained and think that you have to quit. You can find more gas in the tank if you need to. When it comes to being emotionally burned out, that your tank is so far beyond empty that you are essentially useless to the world until you can refill it. And getting to that point is scary, because you feel like you need to do something. You need to work. You need to fight for these kids. You need to be on the phone, on the computer. You need to be taking care of everybody else at the same time that you're doing all of this. And the reality is, as amazing, and I'm not giving myself credit for this at all, but as amazing as parents are that go through this type of diagnosis and this type of life that they're forced into, as amazing as all those people are that we've met along the way and we've stayed in touch with, you can only do so much before your body and your mind shut down and leave you useless to everybody else. And the burnout that we go through as cancer parents, I believe is on a different level than what, let's say, other things, other types of either diagnosis or lifestyle changes or life altering events or things like that. I think there's a different type of burnout for all of those things, and none of them are, any better or worse than the other. It's just I think there's a different level, or a different. It comes at you in a different way, and especially when it involves a child. Um, you very quickly, I know, on a physical level, um, the most tired that I've ever been when it comes to being physically burned out was diagnosis day and the week before JC died. Um, the diagnosis was I had literally worked all day that day, come home, had to go to Milwaukee that night, didn't get the testing and things like that done till early in the morning the next day, um, and eventually passed out from physical exhaustion after for a few hours once we were admitted into a room in the early hours of the 31st. And I physically passed out from exhaustion. And from then on out, it was, you get up, we were with JC all day, and we would do what we could do to kind of keep her going and keep her entertained and happy and things like that. And then again, it was, you would push yourself and push yourself and push yourself to the point where your body would just shut down because you were so tired. And then the last week, the last 11 days that we had with her while we were in hospice, again, that was the most tired I've ever been in my entire life. And that was because, number one, the physical side. JC was not sleeping. She was not sleeping at all because of the drugs that were in her body, were messing with her sleep cycles, messing with her everything, to the point where she couldn't sleep. She'd be up for days on end and never seemed tired. But we were tired. We were burnt. We were burnt out. And a lot of times that came out during that burnout as anger. Nothing violent or anything like that, but definitely lost my temper a few times just because I was so exhausted and so burned out from everything we had we're trying to kind of keep her comfortable, and everything was going on, and it was frustrating because we weren't getting any better answers from anybody, and we were watching our child slowly pass away. Slowly her body was shutting down. She lost the ability to swallow, the ability to communicate, the ability to walk. She slowly lost all of these things, and that is your emotional and your mental burnout. To watch your 8-year-old child, who has so much life left in her, so much to give this world, so much ambition, so much drive to be an entertainer or to be a doctor or a NICU nurse, is what she told us. And she had all that drive, and it was slowly being taken away from her. And we watched that happen. And it was one of the most emotionally and mentally draining things I know that I've ever been a part of in my entire life, to see that happen. And it's a different kind of exhaustion. Physically, your body is just, like I said before, your body, even at physical exhaustion peak, you can still find more gas in the tank if you need it. You can still find that extra gear, and you can find a way to get it done. And there was no way that we were going to lay down on her. We were going to stay moving. If she stayed up for 4 days, 5 days, if she stayed up for 2 weeks straight, then that's what we were going to do. We were going to be there and be part of it. And like I said, it didn't always go well. That burnout does definitely bring out emotions and frustrations and things like that, that's just part of it. But the mental and emotional part of it was probably the most difficult. because I think my wife and I knew what was coming. We knew what was going to happen, and we knew that the only answers we were getting were, we can try this, we can try that, but it's probably only going to buy a little bit of time. It's not gonna save her. And as a parent, to come to the realization, or to come to the understanding that you are going to have to let go, that you know that your child is going to pass away and there's nothing you can do about it. That is, I mean, I can't describe anything else that I've been a part of my entire life that would be more detrimental to somebody's mental health, detrimental to somebody's emotional health, and even their physical health than knowing that somebody's going to die and there's nothing you can do to fix it. And when it comes to being a parent, your one job in this world is to make sure your children are safe, make sure your children are okay, make sure that they make the right decisions and they get the right medicines and they hang around the right people and they go to the right schools, and that's your job. And when you're given a diagnosis of cancer for your child, and you learn so much that I wish I didn't know going through all of this. You learn so much, and you learn so much that isn't being done for kids, and that the reason, maybe one of the reasons that we burn out so fast as parents or even as advocates, is that we realize that we're carrying that weight. We're carrying 100% of the weight for our kids, to make change for our kids, because nobody wants to listen to what we have to say, or if they do, they don't take us seriously. And that it's a very difficult realization. And I think when my wife and I knew that we were going to have to, this realization was going to be coming true, and that we were going to have to say goodbye to JC, and we were going to have to let her go, was after speaking to a doctor from New York. And he was willing to possibly look into getting JC into a clinical trial. But she would have to be flown out to New York, and she would have to be examined to make sure that she was physically able to go through the treatments, physically able to go through the trial in its longevity and the whole thing. And we knew from that point, after that phone call, we knew, I think my wife and I, that there was no way. She was not at that point able and physically able to travel there. I don't think she would have made it. And we, at that point, made a decision that we were not going to put her through that. And we would just keep her at home, and we would hope for the best, and we would pray for a miracle, and just make sure she was comfortable and happy. It's obviously not the way that we wanted to go. We wish we would have been able to find something that would have been able to save her or cure her, give her everything in the world that she deserved, but it just, at that point, was not something that was in the cards. And again, if you want to talk about burning somebody out, that was days, if not weeks and weeks, of reaching out, trying to get a hold of somebody else that would help us, somebody else that would give us a chance and give us an opportunity or a glimmer of hope. And to have that wall come crashing down was something that I think really, really mentally fucked all of us up. That we were we were now bound and determined to a life sentence of knowing that we couldn't save our little girl and that we were going to have to watch her pass away and watch her take her last breath, and say goodbye to her. And it's not something that I would wish on anybody. And in the subject of burnout, I still can take myself there. I have, about 2 months ago, I walked away from my career, so that I could focus on advocating, focus on this podcast, focus on building the Battlecorn Empire, focused on making a difference in this world in our daughter's name. And with that extra time means I've added extra responsibilities, added extra weight to my shoulders, because I want to make sure that I make all the use of this that I can, and that we continue to give JC's name and JC's legacy the respect that it deserves. So I know that I'm still learning all of this. I'm still learning how to take a break. I'm still learning how to shut it off if I need to. I'm still learning how to take a step back, dish out responsibilities to other people, give them the opportunity to run with it, and then just consult or report back to me. It's something that I'm still learning. I don't like to relinquish control, even if I know that it's going to put me at the point of burnout. But it's something that we all have to learn. So in the respect of pediatric cancer, in respect of that diagnosis coming down for a child and for a family, being burned out is something that is very, very common, and I would say is part of every single person's life that you will meet that has a child or had a child that was diagnosed with pediatric cancer. Like I said, some people tend to fade away if their child passes away, or even if they survive long years afterward, they tend to fade out of that world when it doesn't become part of their everyday life. And that's fine. It's not right or wrong. It's how you decide to deal with it. That is up to you. But all too many people wear that smile, wear that laughter, wear that happiness on the outside, and on the inside they're struggling. On the inside, they don't know exactly what to do next. They don't know exactly what route to take or who to talk to. And it can be very, very overwhelming. And it can be the detriment to a lot of couples. I know my wife and I did an episode on this a while ago, the 80-20 rule. 80% of couples will split, whether they're married or dating, whatever the case may be. 80% of couples will split, either during or after a pediatric cancer diagnosis. Only 20% survive this disease, this diagnosis. And, that's, again, you can go back and listen to that episode if you want to see how we've managed to, move through it. But it's because a lot of it is because you are just so stressed out, and unfortunately you will take it out on each other. And you will take it out on your family, and you take it out on yourself by not taking care of yourself. And it's not, excuse me, it's not a violence, it's not an anger thing. It's that you're just so overwhelmed and you're drained, and you can't. It's like all your inhibitions are gone. It's like being drunk, and not being able to do certain things you'd be able to do when you're sober. You don't think ahead. You don't think about the consequences. You don't properly analyze the way things are going to happen. You say what you feel at that moment, or what's passionate on your mind, whatever. And it doesn't always go well. So, I'm going to leave this episode with advice. If you're listening to this podcast and you have a child that is going through this, I'm going to say this to you. Take the time for yourself. Take the time to make sure you're okay. If you have to, get a babysitter for an hour. Go take a bath. Go get a massage. Go take a walk. They will be okay. Just take a minute for yourself. And remember, it's just for you. You matter. As a parent, you matter. You're important. Your child is going through this. They're getting the chemo, the immunotherapies. They're getting the bone marrow transplants, the sticks, the spinal taps. They're getting all of that. And they are badass warriors. But you matter. And if you don't take the time to take care of yourself, you will be of no use to them or anybody else. If you are a parent listening to this podcast and you do not have a child going through this, but you have kids, the same goes for you. You have to take care of yourself or you're no use to anybody else. You have to make sure your health is okay. Your mental health, your physical health. Take care of you. If you need a break, ask for help. This goes for everybody. I am no person to sit here and stand on a pedestal and tell you asking for help is easy, because it's not. I still don't ask for help when I probably need it the most, but I'm working on it. But just know that if you don't, it can be detrimental to you and to your family. So take time for you. Understand that burnout is real. Understand that burnout mentally is different than burnout physically. Burnout emotionally. They're all different things, and you have to take care of each one of those aspects. Otherwise, you're not going to be in a position to take care of the ones that need you the most. That's my advice for you today. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me. Again, different setting, but I will continue to get these episodes out. I hope to have guests with me soon. I've got a few lined up, as well as I'm going to have my wife on with a few other episodes just to speak about the day-to-day life of a cancer parent, both during and after cancer diagnosis and after the unfortunate passing of a child, as well as another thing to talk about is holidays and trigger points and things like that you don't think about on a day-to-day basis. You may take for granted smells, sounds, sights, but I want to talk about those and how they affect us, and the certain ones that will affect us every single day, and how they've affected us personally, and how we use those triggers to try to help other people. So thank you guys so much for sticking with me. I hope to see you here next week when we talked about another episode relating to our daughter's journey through cancer, as well as our family's journey through cancer and the unfortunate passing of our daughter. But she left us a hell of a torch to bear, and we're going to continue to carry that torch and continue to push her message and her legacy until change is made. Thanks, guys.